Hello, everyone. It is me, Novaxo, with another interview of one of Royal Road's best authors. Could you please introduce yourself for the audience?
Hello, my name is Neveniliev, uh, otherwise known on Exterminatus around the interwebs. Original name I know. I route. I write primarily about large chests and the love thereof.
Uh, Very good stories about large chests that everyone loves as well. Uh,
So I'm told.
so, what exactly brought you to Royal Road in the beginning?
Well, at a time this was like ages ago, like 5, 6 years, probably more. I was just scouring the internet, looking for things to keep me distracted as a extremely bored college student.
Okay.
Um, and I got into reading various stories, and somewhere floating around, I found a link to a story on Royal Road, and that's how I found the website.
Well, what was that story, if you don't mind saying, if
Gosh,
you remember?
I don't, I don't even remember. Um, but it was a very typical, lit RPG
Oh yeah,
isekai kind of situation. Yeah,
the more popular written stories on Royal Road, even to this day.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
you read a story on Royal Road, but how did you start writing on Royal Road?
And so I read the story or what there was of it. Right at some point, I hit the last chapter had been posted. I saw it was posted 6 months ago, and I was like, well, this is never getting finished. And so I just kind of completely forgot about that and the website. I didn't really stick around the website too much back then.
Right.
Um, And then, again, few years later, um, I was still, looking for things to do, things to read, and by that point, I was gotten rather tired of the generic nature of the whole isekai genre, and the elite RPGs in general. How uh, a lot of them, um, Japanese light novels
Right.
translated, of course.
Yeah.
For example, you know I found they fell into a pattern. They started off strong with a distinct, if not original premise, but before long, by page 50 or something, they'll kind of start falling
You know, the
falling to the
herons are
same.
introduced, and
Yeah, the harems.
OP. Yeah.
Okay, here's girl number one. Okay,
Yeah.
here's girl number two. Oh, the main character has something overpowered about them. Okay, 50-50 on it being either a gift from a goddess or just something everyone else thought was underpowered.
Right.
Uh, and Um, I eventually was like, uh, I left a comment on Reddit, I think, on a story on the I don't even remember what story it was because they all kind of blend together. But I left a less than flattering comment criticizing it. Uh, and then someone commented me back saying something along the lines of, well, if you think this bad, why don't you do better? And so I did.
Oh, you took it as a challenge. Nice.
Kind of a challenge, but that got me thinking. The saying is, if you want something done right, do it yourself. So I started
Exactly.
writing the stuff I wanted to read, and here we are.
And then 5,765 pages later, 31 million views, and one of the best rated stories on Royal Road. And of course, we can't forget, your other stories that are also very highly rated. We have Everyone Loves Large Chess. Well, everybody loves large chess, sorry. And I will say, you might have been humble about me calling you the best author originally, but Everybody Loves Large Chess to me is probably the most known story on Royal Road for a long time. I mean, it was the first story I was recommended and read, and that's because of probably the best beginning chapter out of Royal Road. Just the shock factor, spoilers to anyone who hasn't read it, of who we thought the main character was being eaten alive. How did you come up with that?
Yeah, so um uh it's not actually my first story, you see. Before that, I wrote another thing on Railroad called The Binary Soul. It's very bad. Please don't talk about it.
Okay.
Um, no, I'm just kidding. But I learned a lot, and that story was, kind of starting to meander. It was losing steam. I was thinking about wrapping it up, and I was looking for something else to do. And then, um, I started looking at things that in stories pissed me off, and I wish were done differently.
Right.
And that being the idea of a monstrous main character, right?
Right.
Because a lot of the times, again, in the isekai TTRPG light novel space, it's just some guy ends up in a monster's body, and then they just kind of try and force their normal values and viewpoints through that monster body,
Right.
right?
Right.
And to that I say, but why though? You're missing so much opportunity to make something like actually stand out. Like a true amoral alien monster's point of view,
Right.
right? Something that's actually interesting to people, because most people are normal,
Right.
I believe, and most
Hopefully.
people would know how a normal person would react in a given situation. So I guess it helps them relate, but at the same time, it's not very interesting to me, at least.
Right.
So I was looking into monsters, and there's all kinds of them. Usually, it's something humanoid, like a goblin
Right.
or an orc
Right.
or something like that. Incidentally, I came across a uh, one where it was they got reborn as a dryad, and they eventually turned their tree into like basically a mech. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, and that was more my speed, right? That
Right.
was more my speed. But yeah, so I started talking with some friends here and there. Uh, got talking about mimics, and we were like, the whole thing was set up right from
Right.
the title. You see the title, you see the cover art, you
Right.
see the synopsis. You start reading the first chapter, and it just kind of leads you down. It's all specifically chosen to paint this idea of what's going to happen,
Right.
and then I immediately pull the rug out under you to let you know that actually no, we're doing something completely different.
Right. Something better, in my opinion.
Well, more unique and original.
Right.
Let's just call it like that.
So, with that first chapter, we get that initial shock value of the main character or who we thought was just getting mauled, right? And this is not the only shock factor that you had within the story. Um, with some of the characters that Boxy gets, uh, ha- my question is why?
Um, because I can.
You know what?
No, on a more serious note, again, because I wanted to write the type of story I wanted to read. And as I
Right,
said, at the time, I was very deep into kind of derivative, samey stuff where it's highly predictable. You kind of know what's gonna happen
right,
already, right? In any given situation. Uh, and I just wanted to try my hand at keeping people guessing, keep them on their toes, right?
right,
But not well. But at the same time, you can't just you know pull a "I am your father" out of nowhere, right? You
right,
gotta you gotta foreshadow a bit. You gotta lay some groundwork so that when you pull that U-turn, you actually make it and don't crash into the wall.
right. So this idea you came up with had made some of my most favorite characters, like the god that constantly changed form and names. That one of my favorite characters. We have a succubus that loved to be eaten, and some other unmentionable ones. If for anyone watching this that hasn't read it, you just have to read it to find out the rest. How did you manage to keep up the quality of the story throughout most of it while keeping these characters unique and original, like with the same purpose?
Um, sorry, can you rephrase that a bit? I don't quite get the question.
Basically, you have very memorable side characters. How did you keep up with those side characters? Because there's characters that are just completely forgotten throughout many stories, and a lot of authors have problems with that. However, your side characters stayed for the most part. You know, the summons, the gods, and how are you able to keep that up over 5,700 some pages?
Right. Well, first of all, I intentionally kept the roster pretty small,
Right,
right? Because if you look at other long running series, it's like hundreds,
right.
hundreds of characters. You
Yes,
know, there's the main cast, and there's all these like supporting, orbiting characters, and some people are absolute gods and legends, and they can, weave them all together, not forget them, keep them relevant as appropriate instead of forcing them just because, right?
right,
But for the most part, I imagine people just adding new characters and then they're immediately forgotten,
right,
as you said. So to that end, I do a couple of things. First, when I you know start thinking of creating a character, right? I start at
okay,
their personality first of all,
okay,
right? Like what sort of person or person adjacent are they? How they would react to this situation. Do they love money? Do they love to eat? Do they love to fight? Do they just want to explore? Do they want to be lazy? I take this jumble of traits and I mash them together into a person so that whenever whenever they come up in the story, when their part comes up and they have to do something or say something, I can just think back to what that personality soup and just
right.
scoop out the right response that feels right for them. Right. So in a way, I guess you could say I was in my head at least. I was role playing as all of them at the same time.
That is a good way to go about that. A lot of people tend to just forget about their characters' personalities, and you'll see people complaining, "Hey, I don't think this character would act like this." So the way you do it is a very good idea. So for any young authors watching this, wanting advice, there's some good advice. Now, with being
Actually, sorry.
oh,
Actually, there is one thing I would like to add to that.
okay,
Um, there's also the idea of if you boil down to it, right? All my characters are pretty one note,
okay,
right? Which is also the point. Most people aren't that multifaceted. I've found at least. You know, like they'll have like one or two things that are their defining traits. Their main line, and then you can add some nuance around it, right?
right,
So should you again, if I were to phrase this as advice, it would be think up as a core of your character that's simple, easy to understand, and then you can expand a little bit outwards from there. Just don't go too wide.
awesome. Now, with being one of the most popular stories for a long time, you've experienced your fair share of praise and criticism. How did you manage all of that? A lot of authors tend to be like, I can't handle the criticism. Sometimes it's unwarranted, which is fair, or people don't really like the limelight, so they stop because of too much praise. How did you balance that in your life?
Um, well, to start with, I've been on the internet for a very long time. As
Right,
a result, I develop a relatively thick skin.
right,
Um, and so when it comes to praise, I find a lot of it is exaggerated.
okay,
And compliments. Oh, this is the best story ever.
okay.
It
Calling me
clearly is
out.
not. Objectively is not. Um, as for the criticisms, I find they often fall into one of two uh, kind of. uh, there's two types of criticism I find.
Okay.
The first is the criticism that's based on sort of mechanical, technical things,
Right.
like grammar, typos, word choice, sentence structure, paragraph, that sort of thing. Things that are objectively right or wrong.
Right.
That is a no-brainer. That you take it, you take it in, you fix it, and you try not to you know to mess that up, right? Because ultimately, if your story reads weird, if there's weird punctuation, the spelling is messed up, it's gonna turn people off, and it's gonna make them lose gradually lose interest because it if you can't take the time to spell correctly, then what hope is there for the rest of this?
Right.
The other type of criticism I found now, this is where we go into the more subjective things like characters and story, uh, and this is where people will start saying their preferences, right? Because ultimately, writing is art. Every person perceives it differently. They like different things. Some people might like this, some people might not like that. So when it comes to that, I don't look at individual reviews. I don't look at individual comments. I try and take a sort of a collective idea of what's happening. Because if most people are saying, "Hey, I like this part. You did good on this part," and then a few people are saying, "This is absolute garbage. Deleted," I can be fairly confident that I've done right, right?
Right.
And again, if the opposite is true, I can think about like rolling back, editing it in extreme cases, or just working with it, trying to avoid certain pitfalls, that sort of thing.
Okay. That's great advice for young authors. Basically, take real criticism at face value and take subjective criticism with a grain of salt, kind of.
Exactly. I mean,
Same
I,
with
I should
praise.
uh, I should I should make a little caveat, a little asterisk here.
Okay.
There are people that are just going to say like just outright verbal diarrhea, like uh, oh, this guy just an absolute hack. Where it's not constructive, it's not criticism. They're just saying mean things on the internet to be mean.
Right.
Obviously, those you should just try and ignore and not let them get to you. Those aren't criticisms.
Awesome. Now, another thing that authors on the website have trouble with is sticking with the story for so long or even just finishing it to begin with. Now, ELLC is, like I said, 5,765 pages and it's completed. How did you manage to pull through all of those pages and make it to the end?
Um, hmm. Well, a significant part of it, uh, believe it or not, is boredom.
Hmm.
I often, back then, I had literally nothing else to do, so I wrote. Especially towards the start, you might notice I posted one chapter, one like every day almost,
Right.
because I had the time and I had the opportunity, and I just wrote because it's gives me something to do, lets my imagination run wild. I get to see people, react in the comments, which is always kind of fun.
Yeah.
Um, but for but ultimately, it's again, you wanna, you know, this is kind of just been repeated ad nauseum in all kinds of like advice when it comes to creative things, and it's write the story you want to read because then you're going to be interested in it, you're going to be invested in it, you're going to look forward to sitting down and furthering the adventure,
Right.
right? Uh, so if some people write just purely by the numbers, like they don't actually care too much about the story itself, they just want to write it to get it out there and maybe start making money, that sort of thing, right? Which completely fine, nothing wrong with that. But you also have to have the right mindset. For people, for someone starting out, don't try to do that. Just write something small, right? And and this is a very important thing. Don't be afraid to call it quits. Because I feel like a lot of people, even if they do, even if they find some measure of success, some measure of popularity, You just try and stretch things out. You just kind of keep that going, but you can't, right? If you feel yourself running out of ideas, if you're feeling yourself running out of steam, right, then look for ways to end, which I'm still kind of struggling because I finished a few stories and all of them kind of end kind of abruptly.
Right.
Um, so I need to work on that. But uh, so to summarize, I write something that's fun to write, as that's the core of it. Because if you're just starting out and you don't have like the sort of the discipline from writing millions of words ingrained into you,
Right.
it just comes down to motivation and obviously inspiration. Um, because writing writer's block is a completely real thing and kind of separate, and I've run into a few times. Which,
Okay.
by the way, the only way through writer's block is just keep chipping at it until it breaks. Just keep writing. Uh, but yeah, so just, I feel like I've gone on a tangent here.
No, that's
Um,
fine. You can talk as much as you want.
yeah. So, what even was the original question anymore?
It was, how did you manage to keep writing all of those pages without getting burnout
Right.
and actually finish?
Yeah. So you do have to keep at it. It's just a matter of persistence ultimately. Like if it's fun to write, that'll help. If you're looking forward to writing, that'll help. If you have ideas, that's inspiration, motivation, all that. But ultimately, if you want to make it as a writer, it just comes down to persistence. Because the more you do a thing, the better you become at doing the thing. That's how humans work, right?
Right.
So you just gotta put in that work, put in those hours. But if you find yourself forcing to do it, like you have to force yourself and you're loathing to do it, probably then you know consider doing something else.
Right.
It's not for everyone.
That's great advice. You see a lot of authors actually end up hating, for what you said earlier about finding something you like, and if you stop liking it, quitting. I've seen so many people try to keep writing what was popular and then end up hating writing because of it. So I think that's a great advice to give the audience.
Yeah.
Now,
If you permit me a slightly crude anecdote, um, in many ways, writing is like going to the toilet. If you have to force something out, nothing pretty is going to come out.
that is great. Oh gosh. So I noticed recently you had started uploading again in the story. Small chests are fine too. And you had finished as far as I know. Do you plan on writing anything else, or do you have anything that you're maybe thinking about writing that you wouldn't mind sharing with us?
Um, well, first of all, the one you mentioned, I actually I was doing a rewrite of that. Uh,
Oh, okay.
yes. So the original, I'm keeping the original up,
Okay.
um, for now at least. But uh, also for those who don't know, Small Chester Fine 2 is a spin-off. It's going to be a singular book. Uh, and it's yeah, the first iteration of it, I wasn't happy with it.
Okay.
I tried a few different things, a little bit of experimentation, and about kind of halfway through it, I kind of realized, yeah, I'm gonna hate this when it's done. But I still finished it. I wrapped it up so that we got, it's a proper story with a start, a middle, and an end. Uh, and then, as I'm putting things out on Kindle and Audible, and the story got to that point, I always intended to rewrite it. It's just that I finally got around to doing that now.
Okay.
It's a And for the most part, it's a very different story. Like the start and the end point are kind of the same, but everything else is completely different. No characters, locales, settings. Uh, the antagonist is the final antagonist is kind of the same, but not really. Anyway, um, right, but Other than that, um, I have also written The Stars Have Eyes,
I
which
see
is
that.
a complete, almost 180 from large chess. Because, well, for starters, it's sci-fi. There's no levels or anything.
Right.
The main character is again non-human. It is a an eldritch monstrosity, except this one is actually trying to be human,
Okay.
uh, instead of giving into its nature and that sort of thing. Also, it's actually a romance, so there you go.
Okay.
But yes, I did that after large chess as a sort of a palate cleanser.
Okay.
Uh, Again, it's not super long. It's a fairly short story, and I did that again to experiment, try new things, and get my headspace out of the whole boxy situation.
Right.
Um, Other than that, I do have another story which is currently on hiatus, or it
Okay.
has been on hiatus for a while. It's called Ursus Ex Machina, which I know is a broken Latin, but nobody actually speaks Latin, so you
Yeah.
know, if you care, you're a nerd. Um, and that's a more down to earth, uh, adventure story.
Right.
It's best to think of it as you know someone telling the story of their Dungeons and Dragons campaign.
Is that actually what it's based off of?
It's not. I
Oh.
have drawn a fair bit of inspiration from a number of D&D games I've been in. Some very long, some very short, but there are elements and characters mixed in there. Again, I like to role play all the characters in my head, so if
Right.
I've already role played all the characters, it's actually easy for me. Uh, but no, it's I am dreaming this up as I go. It's not based on an actual campaign.
Okay. Do you plan on ever returning to it?
Yes, it was on hiatus while I focused on the large chest because the latest volume I was writing it kind of in tandem with the spin-off rewrite. So that
Okay.
was eating up a lot of my time and creative energy.
Okay.
Now that that's done, I will be returning to it soon. Trademark.
Okay. Now, you mentioned D&D, and I'm going to go on a little bit of a side tangent here. One of the things I recommend for authors to get better at creativity or imagination or just overall is to play D&D, whether it's the dungeon master or the role player. Would you agree with this? And has it helped you personally as an author?
Um, I would say there's definitely a fair amount of skills that um you know you could you take from one and apply to the other.
Right.
Absolutely, there's a fair amount of crossover because, especially if you're going to be a dungeon master, you are effectively a writer.
Right.
It's just that you have a bunch of murder hobos ruining your story sometimes. But
Yeah.
if you can handle that, right? Because as a player, right? As a player, you're only worried about, at least initially, you're worried only about your character and yourself,
Right.
right? And then as things develop, uh, things get more serious in game and whatnot. But ultimately, if you want to get some storytelling practice, because that's ultimately what this is about, right? It's storytelling.
Hmm.
If you want to get some storytelling practice, you have to try being a dungeon master. Uh, and if you get good at that, it'll help you with improvisation, with imagination, and all that other stuff. For me personally, I would say it's more like my writing has helped my dungeon mastering rather than the other way
Oh,
around,
okay. Yeah.
right? Because again, a lot of the skills uh, overlap.
Right.
So I already had a good, solid foundation in storytelling, so I just applied that to dungeon mastering.
You're right. I imagine you've made some interesting campaigns if you took inspiration from Everybody Loves Large Chests. Um,
Unfortunately, I've had to keep my campaigns very PG. So
okay, okay. So you've been on this website for a long time.
yes.
I was wondering, do you still read stories on it or anything like that? And
Uh, no, not anymore. No.
okay,
I used to. You know, I read a few that caught my eye, but ultimately, I run out of content.
right,
Either because I've just caught up to the author, and then whether they're still writing it or they disappeared in some infant hiatus or whatever. But I end up running out of content, and then I just kind of forget about it, and then I never come back to it.
right. The reason I ask that is because do you think that it's harder nowadays for an author to get popular compared to before, back when you first started, or even 4 years ago?
I honestly wouldn't know.
Okay. It's just
Um,
a question I ask authors sometimes.
yeah, I honestly couldn't tell you. I don't really keep up to date in the kind of the meta side of things.
Right,
Like what's popular right now, what's trending. Which are
right.
the upcoming authors and stuff like that. I just don't.
Okay, that's fair. Now, what was it like when? Okay, I shouldn't phrase it. Let me rephrase this question. When you first started writing, did you imagine that you would become an author that would get published?
Ah, um, no, not even once. In fact, I mean, I would say I'm still not published because I'm self-publishing.
Right,
Uh, right? Because when you say published, right, that implies you went to an actual publisher, they looked at your stuff, and they say, "I like you, kid.
right,
I like what you're doing. I like your stuff. We're gonna take you on." Right? But no, I did not. In fact, for the longest time, I like people just told me, "Hey, when are you gonna put this out in ebook? When are you gonna put this out on Kindle?" Stuff like that, and I was like, "Nah, I don't want to bother."
right,
Right? Because in my head, because um I didn't need the money, right? I had a day job. I was financially stable,
right.
right? So there was no real incentive for me to do it. Um, and then I found my incentive in that Mr. Jeff Hayes over at Soundbooth Theater.
Okay,
Back in the day, he had a show, a very modest stream where people would request things from Royal Road or from others' websites for him to read and voice act. Uh, and someone repeatedly requested my stuff to him over and over.
right,
And after like, I don't know, 20 or so chapters of my stuff, probably probably closer to 10, but after a lot of doing that, I was like, this guy could add a whole new dimension to my story. I
right.
want to hear this guy voice act my story. So that, but, and obviously doing that for free with, as you said, 5,700 pages is just ridiculous.
It's a
So
tall order.
it's a tall order. So I put it up. I started self-publishing on Amazon through Kindle, which incidentally very easy to do. I started doing that, and ironically, even though my goal wasn't to make money, I was so successful that I could just you know quit my actual job and just live off of
Right.
being an author. So I just kind of fell into it, I guess you could say.
All right.
Um, and again, I think I've forgotten the question.
No, I just asked, did you imagine yourself when you first
Ah,
started writing becoming published author? And you gave advice that I feel like some authors should realize is the authors that do really well don't expect to. So you don't have to expect yourself to become published to be actually be able to come published. Because I know too many authors that try to do it for money, and they think they have to have this attitude where they have to be professional. But you are definitely one of the people that proves you don't have to come in thinking that you're just going to do this for money, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah. I will say you do absolutely have to have a certain degree of professionalism
Right,
when it comes to your writing. As I mentioned, on a technical level,
right,
your text has to look professional. It has to be edited. There can't be there has to be a minimal amount of those objective mistakes. Spelling, grammar,
right.
word choice, all that stuff. Right. So in that aspect, you have to be professional. Now, whether you go chasing trends, bandwagoning, trying to catch a wave of whatever stories are popular. Absolutely. But the thing is, you have to be very quick at writing if you're doing that
Okay, yeah,
because fads come and go, as they say.
they do.
Um, but yes, you shouldn't. If I don't know, some people might think this is kind of a bad attitude, but I think if you're starting a creative process like writing with the outset of making money instead of thinking of I love doing this thing and also I would like to make some money, right? In the
Right.
former case, I think you're kind of setting yourself up to fail because you don't actually believe, you're not invested in your own work, which means it's going to suffer quality wise, and you're probably not even going to finish it.
Right. I completely agree with that. Now, another problem, you know how you brought up lit RPGs? One major problem they always have is the system tends to bog them down a lot. Now, you have a well crafted system, in my opinion. How did you manage to not make it so it's so overbearing where it ruins the story?
Um, I'm not quite sure. Okay, in what respect do you think systems become overbearing? Because in my experience, my own systems started becoming overbearing for me.
Okay.
Because um, you know, thinking back on it now, I should have made it simpler, more minimalist,
Right.
not so much huge numbers and endless, skill trees and skill lists.
So, but what I mean by that is there will be some stories where it's just blue boxes. If you know what I mean, just the whole thing is just blue boxes and they can't get around it, and that's when the reviews start coming in saying, the system kind of ruined the story. But
Uh,
I don't think I've ever seen anyone say that everybody loves large chess system impacted the story at all in a
oh,
negative way.
okay. So, um, right. The thing about that is, uh, if you think about it like playing a game, right?
Right.
Uh, starting a new game, an MMO is a MMORPG is a perfect example of this. But you can also be attributed to any RPG game, really. You start the game and you see all this shiny stuff, all these buttons, all these graphics, all these
Right.
icons. There's like a combat log filled with numbers and texts.
Yeah.
And at first you're like, whoa, what is this? You're trying to make sense of it. And then after a while, you kind of stop paying attention to it.
Right.
It's there if you need it.
Right.
Right? And I think that's maybe what people are kind of, failing to understand is you don't need to show the reader everything
Right.
that happens. You can infer things have happened,
Okay.
right? Uh, like for example, a lot of the time I won't even give the blue box. I'll just put it in line in the paragraph. I'll say something like, you know, and as he was doing that, he noticed he got a couple of level ups, which was always nice,
Right.
you know. So it's good to have those to set things up.
Right.
Let the reader know that's there, that's happening, right?
Right.
But after a while, gradually kind of phase those out and bring them up only when it's actually important or relevant, or every now and then. Like when there's an important level up or an important skill has been gained or something along those lines, right?
Right.
Because then they become impactful. When you see them, it's like, oh, something serious is going down.
Right.
So
I
I guess it's all about pacing.
That is the perfect answer that I was looking for. Thank you for that. Now, when it comes to writing, a long story. Back to the length of your story, because that's one of the biggest problems I see young authors having. How could you create so many ideas to make it that long without reusing things?
Um,
Like to the
well,
point
first of all,
where people didn't like it because where they were pointing out he's reusing things, it's getting boring. Um,
and repetitive, yeah.
right,
Um, well, I think first of all is I've had a lot of things to give me ideas and inspiration,
right.
right? So we're talking, and I'm not talking like something profound, like I went to the Grand Canyon.
Okay, yeah,
Yes, screw the outdoors, right? I'm
right,
talking. I'm basically a neat, right?
right.
I live. It's like I practiced social distancing before it was cool. Let's put it like that.
Probably most of us have, and most people watching this probably did too.
Yeah, but movies, video games,
Right,
comic books,
right,
uh, and just other stories you read, right? All of that can give you ideas of what to do, and it's okay, right? It's okay to borrow things from other places, right? It's okay to you know, as I like to call it, pay homage to certain things. Make references. Uh, no, uh, I shouldn't phrase it like that. What I meant was, it's okay to take ideas that you like, that you think could work in your own story, right?
right.
And then just kind of work towards them. Don't just slap them in out of nowhere because people are going to notice if something suddenly pops up. Just work towards it, right?
Right.
Um, for example, mild spoilers. Uh, One of the things with large chests, starting out, I knew, like right from the start, as fun as it is for to read about the stupid box in the maze,
Right.
that couldn't last,
Right.
right? That couldn't last. Stories have to change, characters have to change,
Right.
and so I had um, set up that whole randomness and luck factor thing. I had it set up very early, uh, with the express purpose of having an excuse to give my main character, who is an absolute dumbass, can't even form coherent thoughts at that point, give it a minion that physically can't harm it.
right.
Right? Something believable, something
Right.
you know. I'm not gonna say realistic. The word I like to use is authentic.
Yeah.
Right? Um, but yeah, but doubling back is two things to avoid being repetitive. Right? First of all, be as vague as possible until you can't afford to be, right?
right.
No, no, seriously, be as vague when it comes to distance, when it comes to time, like days, weeks, and all that. Where when it comes to that sort of thing, try and to be vague.
Okay.
When it comes to your world's mechanics, how does magic work, that kind of stuff. Be vague, because when you're vague, later on you have the wiggle room to kind of slot in something that you have thought up later and you want to use,
Right.
right? So when you're vague, within reason, of course, you can't just be completely, people have to learn, establish some ground rules, but leave a lot of things unspoken until such point that it becomes relevant.
Right.
At that point, right, you can change your own world behind the scenes without anyone noticing to fit whatever new idea you've come up with.
Right.
Again, this is a very delicate balance, and I don't think everyone can do this. This is
Of
just
course.
my approach, right? But be vague. Be vague so you have wiggle room, first of all. Secondly, and I already mentioned this, but I'll repeat it here, things have to change. Characters have to change. The world has to change. Because if you don't change, you stagnate. If you stagnate, you end up repeating yourself because you don't know what else to do.
Right. That's
Right? And I think can you agree my in large chess the main character has gone through so much change you can't even recognize it towards the end.
right. I mean, he barely went. He went from barely coherent sentences to being a very, very cunning monster, I guess I should say. And
Yes.
that change was great to read about. But one of my favorite parts is how funny the story is. Now, some people are born funny or it's the way it's raised. Do you have a specific way in which you were able to make so many funny scenarios that you could give advice to for young authors?
Um, an easy way to be funny. Um, right. An easy way to be funny is um, well, I shouldn't say it's easy, but a simple way to be funny is to be spontaneous and unexpected. The unexpected is funny
Right.
more often than right. In more often, unless it's like absolutely disastrous, like a car crash or something, right?
Right.
But the unexpected things happening seemingly out of nowhere is funny. Um, and then right, you have the other simple way, which is recurring gags. Again, pacing is important. You can't do it too much or do the same joke over and over too
Right.
much, or people are gonna get tired of it. Um, one of my often recurring gags is with the succubus, which uh, as you said, is becomes an extreme masochist,
Right.
and so one of the recurring gags is just her, thinking up ways to get her kicks.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and again, if you can, and if you can mix that with the spontaneity, where it's like it's a recurring gag, but if it comes kind of out of nowhere without people seeing it coming a mile away, then double value,
Right.
kind of. But yeah, so simple ways, not easy. Simple ways is be is try and surprise people and try and see if you can find some recurring gags you can use.
Right. It, that is great advice. And with how funny your story was, it also had very tense moments. How were you able to create such like tense nature with Boxy almost getting killed more times than I could count, but it not seeming like he gets out from like a Deus Ex Machina where like he just gets out because of plot armor? How are you able to juggle that like comedy that was a little unrealistic and then actually make it so he got out in authentic and realistic ways?
Right. Um, I think one of the things that has helped me is, as I said, I've set up the whole. One of the themes throughout the entire story is luck swings both ways. Right.
Right.
You can get extremely unlucky, or you can get extremely lucky, or which are actually the same thing. If you want to argue about it.
Yeah.
Um. So but aside from that, again, I was vague, so I have wiggle room so that, oh, how's Boxy gonna get out of this one? Oh well, there's all these things I haven't mentioned that I could mention that I could pull out now that they seem relevant and didn't before, right?
Right.
Um, but I think the most important thing, um, okay, I'm sorry, I've just lost track of the question again. Can you repeat it?
It's me asking how you're able to keep that unrealistic kind of comedy aspect, but keep a realistic tension throughout the story. And an example was
Ah,
Boxy nearly dying a bunch.
okay, thank you. Um, yeah, so as I was saying, for me at least, it's very important to thread the notion throughout your story that everything comes at a price, right?
Right.
Because yes, Boxy escaped a bunch of near-death scenarios, but because they
A
were
lot.
near-death scenarios, they always came at a cost. You know,
Right.
usually it's through a whole bunch of pain.
Right.
Um, like if your character's hurting the entire time, like they're actually struggling, that's a very obvious way of doing it. But there could be other ways, like for example, could have sold his soul, or maybe contracted a weird disease afterwards, or something like that, right? The way you avoid plot armor is to avoid creating a scenario where you have the perfect win.
Right.
Like if it's a win, have there be some kind of cost, some kind of setback, intangible setback, right? Not
Right.
just he's covered in bandages and then 2 scenes later he's hopping around perfectly fine.
Right. I feel like that also makes the perfect wins that much sweeter. Because I remember Boxy pulling off like a crazy scenario where it ended out well for him, and me actually being excited for him and not being like, well, who would have thought? He did it perfect again. So that's actually really good advice. And I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. Um, Honestly, I didn't think about that either. But yes, for the few cases where it pulled off the perfect win, uh, I'm I could be wrong. It might not be 100%, but I try and keep it so that if the price was kind of paid in advance
Right.
in terms of setup, in terms of preparation,
Right.
conditioning, like it spends, for example, months setting up this alter ego, this fake persona to blend into society,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And so when some suspicions arise later down the line and some things pop up, it's like not even a problem because that groundwork had already been laid out, right?
Right.
There is an old uh, uh, kind of screen cap from one of the internet boards about someone playing. Uh, I don't remember which edition, but it was Dungeons and Dragons
Okay.
as a bear, right? They were a rogue. They maxed out their bluff skill, and the story went that because their bluff skill was so insanely high, nobody could tell they were actually a bear. They thought they were just an extremely fuzzy, an extremely hairy fat guy who just spoke through grunts and gestures, right? And then, deep into the campaign, some random NPC in the king's court beat the bluff check, right? They actually saw through the disguise. They pointed to the guy and they said, "Hey, hold on a minute. That's not a knight. That's a bear." And then that guy was hauled off like a crazy person,
So-
right?
okay, so could you? I remember the Tankerer saga, right? Where he came in and learned tankering.
Right.
Did that take kind of inspiration from that, or is that just a coincidence?
Um, I don't think I would. I don't think that particular you know
Sure.
meme has had any special inspiration, right?
Okay.
It's just that I was just kind of trying to illustrate how, and this is again, kind of towards the latter half of the book. If you tell a lie often enough, it kind of becomes the truth, right?
Right.
And that's my way of trying to say that if you put in that groundwork, then those perfect wins they kind of come around as less plot armor and more just, well, what did you expect was going to happen?
Right. So, I've honestly ran out of questions at this point. You've been great to interview. It's been extremely fun talking to you. You've given some great advice for any authors watching this, and I'm sure you've given your readers a couple of laughs if they've been listening. And I just want to ask, do you have any advice, like general advice that we haven't talked about, that you would like to give people trying to give their hand at writing that you think they should know first?
Right. Well, I think I've given. Hold on, give me a second. I need to look something up. Because believe it or not, I have been asked this
Oh,
a few times.
okay.
Believe it or not,
I can
and I
believe it.
did actually write, make a short essay on the subject. That whenever someone asks me for writing advice, I can just give them the essay.
Right.
I've already covered some things, right?
Right.
Like persistence, for example, which I mentioned, because
Yep.
um, you know, something I didn't mention. Um, which is from lore perspective, right?
Okay.
Whether that be world building or character design, you you don't want to be upfront with that,
Right.
right? Like paint a picture in as few words as you can. Just don't be upfront too
Okay.
much because people don't want to sit through 20 pages of explanations, right?
Yeah.
Show them the characters. Most stories these days at least are very character driven,
Yeah.
right? So focus on the characters and then build the world around them, right? Don't front load your story with exposition and explanations
Right.
because unless people get into the characters, all that none of that other stuff is going to matter.
Yeah.
Um, another thing is consistency, right?
Yeah.
Once you commit to something, you need to stick through it. Now there can be exception to things, like for example, you've set up magic a certain way, right? Like say, oh, you can only cast one spell in the full moon or something, right?
Yeah.
Um, if you've set it up, stick to it. That's also why, again, you want to be a little bit vague so that you know you can tweak the rules a little bit so you don't write yourself into a corner.
Right.
Uh, but yes, you need to be internally consistent, right? In whether it be characters, whether it be setting, whether it be mechanics, uh, whatever it is, you need to be internally consistent because people appreciate that, they can identify with that, and it helps them stick with the story if you have that baseline, right?
Yeah. And no,
Uh,
oh, I was gonna say no one will call you out quicker for inconsistency than readers as well. They are very quick about that, and I know some readers who probably know the story better than some of the authors do at some points.
yeah. I will quickly say a character, right? Um, but again, this is all very subjective, but what works for me is when I have to make a new character, the very first thing I think about, right,
Okay.
is their appearance,
Okay.
right? Because that's what your reader is going to read about first, hopefully, and that's what you know in character others are going to see, right?
Right.
So first you come up with the appearance. Once you have the appearance, right, then you you know fill them up with that character soup I mentioned earlier. The
Yep. Personality.
motivations,
Yeah.
desires, whatever what have yous. Uh, and then once you have that, now you have a shell, you have filled it with a personality. Only then do you think about backstory,
Right.
right? Because I feel like a lot of people start with a backstory, and I feel like that's kind of wrong because you're setting yourself up. You're kind of limiting your options if you do that, in my opinion.
Okay.
Again, that's that's how I feel works best. Um, oh yes, and one more thing. Again, I think I mentioned this, but I'm just going to say it here so it's clear. It's okay to not be original. It's okay to be iterative. It's not derivative, iterative. What it means is you take an idea that you've seen elsewhere, that's probably been proven to be popular and funny in work,
Right.
and then you incorporate it into your own work, right?
Right.
You add on to it. You add something, a little bit of flavor, a little bit of spice to make it your own. It's okay to do that. You don't have to be original for the sake of being original. It's okay to lean on tropes,
Right.
right? And that's another thing about tropes. They're not always bad. Sometimes tropes can be very useful as shortcuts,
Yeah.
right? Because when you say elf, when you say orc, when you say dwarf, that instantly, for most people, is going to paint a picture in their mind just with those words,
Right.
right? So do not be afraid to lean on tropes. Do not be afraid to, you know, borrow ideas. Just make sure you put a little spin on them. Make your own unique blend out of all these ingredients.
Right. That's great advice that I wish I knew when I first started writing. To be honest with you, um, do you have any last, well, other than the advice, any last words that you would like to say before I end this interview?
Um, don't drink bleach, kids.
That is great advice, and I'm sure bleach companies around the world will thank you for that. And thank you for your time. You've been a great guest. You've given some of the best advice I've heard, and I really appreciate you taking your time and joining me here.
No worries. Thanks for having me. I love
Of
talking
course.
about myself.
Well, if you ever want to talk about yourself again, we could do multiple editions, and hopefully, we'll have some viewers at that point that can ask you some questions so I don't have to think of everything.
Sounds fun. Let's make a podcast out of it.
Hey, we might need to talk a little bit after I stop recording this. Anyways, thank you for listening and watching, and I am Novaxo, and I'll see you in the next interview.